are live. Hi, everybody. I'm Austin with the School of Cities, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the special edition of Knowledge Café. Knowledge Café at the School of Cities is a monthly speaking opportunity for members of the tri-campus community to present insights and highlights of their research on a theme that is important and relevant to cities. It provides a platform for faculty, students, and researchers who are working to uncover solutions to creating more just, equitable, sustainable, and prosperous cities, which we will be hearing in a couple minutes. Before I introduce today's session, I'd like to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. This land, covered by Treaty 13, is the traditional lands of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit, and continues to be the gathering place of many Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit peoples from across Turtle Island. As we hear about local solutions to pressing issues from across the country today, we ask that you study and consider the Indigenous histories of your own local settings, and consider acts of reconciliations which may be taking place there as a form of local solutions themselves. In just a moment, I'll be turning our session over to the School of Cities Senior Research Officer and the moderator of today's discussion, Catherine Exon-Smith. Before I do, I just want to cover a few housekeeping items. Due to the size of today's audience, you'll notice that all microphones will remain muted aside from those of the hosts. We hope that you use the chat function to put all questions and comments throughout the session, which will be collected and addressed near the end of the session. Please practice good etiquette. Anyone demonstrating inappropriate language or behavior will be removed from the session. And without any further ado, I'd like to hand today's session over to Catherine. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Magda. Thank you for everyone on the team for putting this together. As Austin said, I am Catherine, and I am the Senior Research Officer here at the School of Cities, where I lead the research work we do with external partners. Good afternoon to you all, and good morning to those joining from further west. Last year, we decided we wanted to look at what was happening across Canada in cities a little bit differently. Instead of talking about the problems that we have, which I think we all know a fair bit about, we wanted to talk a bit more about the solutions, what's actually working, so we could learn from that and try to spread that across the country. We issued a national call in the summer, and we got an overwhelming response of solutions. We had 150 something of them. They were from individuals, from nonprofits, from cities, from other types of organizations, from the private sector. And we picked our favorites. And the result was a report that we released in December called Learning from What Works. It is 7 chapters. It had 89 different ideas that are addressing housing, mental health, climate change, lots of other things, plus a chapter about how to scale innovation and great ideas across the country. You can find it on our website, and I think Austin's going to put a link to it in the chat as well. And the genesis of this talk today, this webinar, is that we wanted to do a bit of a deeper dive because we were just so inspired putting together this report that we wanted to talk more about it, and we wanted to talk with people who are leading this kind of change. And in particular, we chose these 3 speakers today because they are working within municipal governments. And we wanted to understand how they made these ideas happen from within government and how to encourage more innovation in that space and maybe inspire a little bit of it elsewhere. So I've asked each of them to give us today a brief overview of the problems they were trying to solve, and also some of the challenges that they faced in implementing their solution, and then how they did it and what they learned from it. And then we're going to have a broader Q&A about taking risks within government and how to encourage innovation. And so we are hoping to get to a lot of your questions as well. So please feel free to post them in the chat. I know we have a lot of passionate urbanists and interested and municipal staff joining us today. So we'd love to hear from you and we'd love to hear your questions. All right, so we're going to start today with Caitlin Beaton, who is joining us from Edmonton. Welcome, Caitlin. Caitlin leads system-level homelessness prevention and response strategies for the City of Edmonton. Her work focuses on creating pathways to housing and sustainable support systems. And Caitlin's going to tell us about the water stations that Edmonton created, which is a project we just loved in its elegance and simplicity. And I'm sure we're going to hear all about the ways it wasn't simple, but Caitlin, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you. And I think we have Caitlin's slides that we can pull up too. Thank you.
Awesome. Good morning. Thank you for having me here this morning, this afternoon, for those of you out east. As Catherine said, my name is Caitlin and my pronouns are she, her, and I work for the City of Edmonton on Treaty 6 territory, and our team at the city works on homelessness prevention and response. And today I'm sharing a story of turning standard city infrastructure, our fire hydrants, into water stations for most vulnerable citizens, which this project is a key component of our extreme weather response strategy. Next slide. So if you ask people what the synonym for Edmonton is, the word that likely comes to mind is cold or snow, and especially on a day like today. But you're probably wondering why I'm talking about winter when the title of this presentation was on water stations. But I promise I will get there. So between 2013 and 2019, despite Edmonton having adequate shelter capacity, people experiencing homelessness were increasingly likely to sleep outdoors. And the city of Edmonton was seeing a growing number of encampments, which during extreme weather conditions, such as winter and heat in summer, were leading to weather-related injuries and fatalities. This culminated in 2019 when a man's death was linked to the cold, which you can see some of the headlines that were in the news related to that. Also at the time, the number of people experiencing homelessness was on the rise in Edmonton. So during this time, the city played a role in planning responses to extreme winter weather in partnership with Homeward Trust Edmonton, which was the organization that was the system planner for homelessness in the city. And we also partnered with 25 social service agencies. And at this time in 2019, there was no system-wide response that addressed extreme heat in Edmonton, which with climate change was becoming more and more common. Next slide. Following the headlines on the previous slide, City Council directed administration to prepare a policy for helping vulnerable residents during extreme weather events, which was passed in summer 2019. If you are like really nerdy and you want to like read the policy, it's C620 and the title is on the slide. So this policy built over a decade of coordinated work with the homelessness serving system of care in Edmonton and was really meant to augment and provide additional measures to ensure the well-being of people experiencing homelessness. And we always, like the way the policy is structured, it ensures that we are supporting and augmenting available resources in the sector. And so like we are not working in isolation, but as part of a community level response. Prior to 2019, there was no sector response for extreme heat, which was becoming more and more common. And as part of the policy, we had done engagement with the sector, but also jurisdictional scan on what other municipalities were doing around extreme weather. And through our engagement with homeless serving organizations and health officials, the chief concern facing vulnerable populations during hot summer weather was dehydration. And then as part of our jurisdictional scan, we were looking at what other municipalities did. We found examples of how hydrants were being used creatively to provide water. And so pictured here is a fire hydrant in Calgary that was part of the inspiration. And it essentially was an it essentially was an art installation that hooked up a water station to the fire hydrant. So now we have, because of the policy, we have responses that are activated during extreme heat, cold, and poor air quality to ensure the safety of vulnerable Edmontonians. And I should say that while the focus is on people experiencing homelessness, we know that there are other populations that can be made vulnerable during extreme weather. And so, like, for the example of extreme heat, we know that elderly, people working outdoors, children, or people in low incomes that don't have access to like cooling facilities or like air conditioning, people can be made vulnerable during extreme heat. Um, yeah, so next slide, please. So picture here is our water station. Our extreme heat response includes these water stations, which operate from about the beginning of June till the end of September. We install them and they operate all summer long in Edmonton. Other components of our extreme heat response, we open city facilities in order for people to cool down. We distribute water bottles, and we have a summer resource card that lists available resources for people to go to access shelters, housing supports, and health services. So our extreme heat response is triggered when temperatures reach 29 degrees Celsius with nighttime lows of 14 degrees or higher for 3 consecutive days. And so I'll just chat more about the water stations, but they've been a key component of our extreme heat response since 2021. And after seeing creative uses of fire hydrants in other jurisdictions, we worked with our fabrication center at the City of Edmonton, so like an internal business area, on how we could build a water station that attaches to fire hydrants. So this pilot started with 5 water stations, and after conversations, we recognized that it was, and even public feedback that we had heard, people really liked the project. And it wasn't just people experiencing homelessness that were using them, but people commuting on their bicycles, or if they were near playgrounds, families filling up water bottles. So today, we have over 30 stations, and there are now attached pet bowls at each water station. So next slide. So some of the challenges that we have faced is, I would say, like NIMBY attitude. I think in the early days, people would associate water stations as like for homeless people, and so they didn't want them in their neighborhood because they thought that homeless people would congregate in these areas. Also, in the first 3 years, it was also difficult to quantify usage. So, like the volume of water being used, the number of people that were using them, and whether they were being used appropriately or not. And what we found is that if you didn't have quantitative data, anecdotal stories could become a very powerful narrative. So, like, as you can probably imagine, um, they are sometimes seen being used for people to wash their clothes in. And so then people just like will, even if only one person ever washed their clothes in the water station, but someone saw it, then that story can be sort of like, well, they just are for homeless people and they just wash their clothes and cause a big mess. So over the years, we have had to like adapt the design to respond to how people were using them. So one of the things that we did is we included a spring-loaded shutoff valve so that the water station could only be opened as you were like turning the handle. We ended up adding water meters to them so we could understand like the volume of water that was being used to determine whether that location was going to be appropriate or it was like used enough for following summers. And then we also attached pet bowls because some of the locations that we have, they're close to parks and where pets, and so the bowls catch like the water as it's like being released. And so, as you can see, the impact is since 2023, when we added water meters, we over 2.1 million liters of water have been used, and it is a program that's universally used by all Edmontonians. And overall, I would say, like for a municipality, which don't often have good track records of running inexpensive, low-cost programs, I would say this. I looked back, and last year this program cost us about $50,000 to run. And if you want like to fabricate new stations, it's about $4,500 a station. And so one of the visions that our team has is that it just becomes public infrastructure, and just like you expect parks and playgrounds in every neighborhood, I would like to see water stations just being part of like common infrastructure that everybody could, that's available for everyone. Because I would say that water, we all need it. So yeah, that is my presentation, and I'll hand it back over to Catherine.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of support in the chat as well for fountains that are functional and also beautiful sometimes too. Some of these things can make a real difference. So yeah, thank you. Thanks, Caitlin. All right, next we will turn over to Donna Heslin. Donna leads the entrepreneurship and innovation portfolio for the City of Mississauga, supporting small businesses and driving inclusive economic growth. She previously founded the University of Toronto Mississauga's Entrepreneurship Hub and also focused on building collaborative entrepreneurial systems during her PhD research while at the University of Toronto. Donna's going to be talking about Idea Mississauga, which we just thought was such an interesting and creative way to build more inclusive entrepreneurship. So Donna, over to you.
Great, thanks so much. Happy to be here. I see another Mississauga person there, so shout out. Do we have the slides? Yeah, great. Go right to the second slide. Thank you. So I am part of the economic development team at the City of Mississauga. We are called Invest Mississauga, and we've been focused for years on that early stage business growth, that small business enterprise center model, which is common across Ontario communities, that's funded by the ministry, that has starter company plus as well as summer company, which I'll share a little bit about later. And then we have our other side of the team, which is more focused on the large companies within the city, foreign direct investment, bringing in large companies. And there was a bit of a gap between those two supports. So we had early stage, sort of mom and pop shop retail businesses supported, home-based businesses, and then the bigger, medium-sized to bigger companies. And there wasn't a big connection between the two. So they were a bit sort of operating in silos in many ways. So having the opportunity to try and bridge that, there was a report that went out throughout 2018 and presented to council in 2019. I was still working at U of T at the time, but was pulled in because of my involvement with launching the accelerator on campus within Mississauga. And what we saw from the community is there was lots of supports for the startup side. You know, there was Edge at Sheridan. We had U of T Mississauga. Sorry. My phone here, 1 second. Apologies. The U of T Mississauga had their startup support. Sheridan had theirs. We had our accelerator, our regional innovation accelerator, but supporting all of Peel. So supporting Mississauga, Caledon, and Brampton. And just those supports there to get companies to the next level weren't there. So we pitched that to council, and the big pieces coming out of that study showed that we needed enhanced awareness of the existing supports that were there. Supports for companies that were looking to scale, that were looking to get to that bigger size company model, and then physical supports, physical space to support that as well in an accessible, visual, really visible location. And what came out of it, next slide, is a vision that we wanted to elevate Mississauga's entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem by working with all of our partners collaboratively to support businesses to launch, grow, striving for inclusivity, diversity, sustainability, and global engagement. Next slide. So a few of the big things that happened, my role was part of it. There was a version of this role before, but my role is really focused on not just that small business community, but looking at small business as well as scaling supports. We did a full rebrand where we created the logo, Idea Mississauga, and we started to showcase on Instagram, Facebook. We really reached out to social channels. We made sure our website was much more visible as well. And then we tried to find a location. So this all happened during COVID lockdowns. We got to walk them all, masks on, walking around, looking at spaces within it. So if you're not familiar with Square One, it's the second largest mall right behind Edmonton. And it's right in the center of Mississauga. So it really is accessible. We have free parking all around. Our transit hub is there, so it's really easy to get to from anywhere in the city by 1 or 2 buses. And then we're in a spot that's a little bit end of unit, so not as desirable for retail. So this space, it's the old Target Zellers location, and it was not as desirable for retail, given it was at the end of unit, and then also not as visible to the rest of the mall, but perfect for us because we are a destination location. Over 2 million people come through the doors that we're located per year. So a very busy mall. We have people walk in all the time. So our space isn't huge. We're 4,300 square feet, a good size, broken into 3 areas that have offices for co-working and rental. We have what you're seeing here is the event space. So we can do in-person, we can do hybrid or record events there. And it hosts up to 100 people standing room only. We can do 50 people seated theater style. And then we can do about 25 to 30 within the space if we want to do more of that classroom environment and do some of our sessions. So we opened that space 3 years ago now, 2023 coming up. We still run our entrepreneurship programs, advisory services, and community events there. So next slide, please. These are the programs that we're running beforehand. We were located in the back of the central library. It was a little tucked away, a little hard to find, and we couldn't run events there. We couldn't host other companies as well, but we did have great programming. So across Ontario, you've probably seen these. We have the Starter Company Plus program, which continues to run. We have business advisory services, which is that core programming, free programming that anyone can walk in at any point and say, I have an idea for a business, I want to start a business, or I want to grow a business. And we have supports on that front. And then we have the Summer Company program, which is targeted to students that are returning to school. If they want to launch a program in the summer, they have $3,000 grants. And in the Starter Company Plus program has $5,000 grants. Those were the existing programming. And then the next stage that we added was the growth stage. So initially it was the Step Up program we launched in 2021. And that program, we're now in our 5th cohort, and we've had about 60 companies come through that. And these are ones that are innovative companies that are in a growth phase, usually between $100,000 a year to $2 million in revenue, and looking to grow to the next phase. So we do focus on life sciences, tech companies, as well as advanced manufacturing, but we are broader than that. We've had some food and beverage companies come through that are more on the scaling side, looking to franchise or have an innovative model. And then 2 years ago, we launched the Empower Her Tech Launchpad, which focuses on women founders. And we did this specifically because we were seeing across entrepreneurial pieces, we've noticed broadly that women are lower coming into the table. So we wanted to make sure there was support specific there for women tech founders. And we've had really good supports in this. We're in our 2nd cohort of the Empower Her program. And we do this in partnership with Y Space at York University. So we are taking in beyond the Mississauga boundaries. We're taking across the GTA companies, but it is in person. So really good programming as well there. Next slide. And just what we've seen over the last 3 years since we've been open, we've had well over now, these numbers are a little bit dated, but 6,500 business inquiries, 850 personalized consults, over 150 businesses started, 120 businesses expanded. And the cool thing that we weren't sure if we'd get there or not, over $15 million raised by the companies in the Step Up and Empower Her program. So we're really proud of that number because that's a hard number to hit, especially in our current times with venture capital being low. We've had over 2,500 attendees at events. We've hosted 60 plus events and workshops and over 1,200 jobs created in that time. And then last slide, I think, is some of our partners. So as I mentioned before, It was a bit fractured. We're working really closely with SpinUp and iCube at U of T Mississauga. SpinUp is Wet Labs. And then Edge at Sheridan and iCube both do social impact ventures. And then Altitude Accelerator is our regional innovation center. So we work closely, making sure that founders are finding the right supports at the right time within the city. And also ensuring that they have that models and supports. We have mentors that we pull from Altitude Accelerator. We have programming, we have events we do together as well. So lots of great interactions between the partners. And so it's less of a competitive model and more of a collaborative model. And I think that's it for now. Yes, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Such a creative use of space and such a great impact in a short time. Thank you, Donna. Great. Well, finally, we'll hear from Becky Katz. Becky is a manager in the City of Toronto's Transportation Services Operations and Maintenance section, where she oversees a team of 70 staff responsible for the upkeep and winter maintenance of the city's sidewalks, bikeways, and streets. Thank you for being here today, Becky, when it is doing this outside. She previously led Toronto's Cycling and Pedestrian Projects Unit, which delivered the largest on-street cycling network expansion in the city's history. And she's also done work in Berlin and Atlanta. Becky, I will turn it over to you and we will bring up your slides. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to share our approach to active transportation procurement for maintenance practices and give you a little insight into what is working, which is always, as highlighted in the beginning, really fun to focus on. We could go to the next slide. So in the past bunch of years, our active transportation network has really scaled up, and we've used a variety of different material types, which have various maintenance burden, as you can see in this photo on the left, where we have some barriers knocked out of place, probably by a motor vehicle. These are types of repairs that need to happen quickly. And also there needs to be consideration about when we actually upgrade these materials from the precast materials that have a larger maintenance burden. In 2023, we actually launched 311 specific service requests for all the precast materials, which previously we were getting them through various different other problem codes. And in operations and maintenance, 311 does guide a lot of our work. So you can go to the next slide. So I guess the first innovation that we came up with is that initially a lot of what guided our active transportation maintenance, and really what guides quite a lot of our maintenance anyway, was a reactive model. So we would wait till we got a 311 request that said something is broken, and then we would go out and repair it. But what we found, particularly for bikeways, was that the 311 requests were not capturing the full scope of some of the issues out there. 311 also, it's easier to submit something that is a singular point than it is some repeatable issue along a corridor. And so we were getting a lot of requests that was like, oh, for this address, but actually there was a multitude of issues. So the first thing that we've done in the past 3 years to improve our maintenance practices for active transportation, particularly those that include paint and posts and curbs and bollards, is we've taken a lot of the maintenance in-house. And we're not only doing the repairs, but we have converted our staff to doing the repairs sustainably. So we actually, during the spring, summer, and fall months, we have staff members who actually patrol all of the bikeways once a month by e-bike. And 2 of the staff members use a cargo e-bike and bring bollards with them, so that if they identify bollards that are broken, they can actually just repair them right away without even having to go back to the yard, submitting a work order, and then getting somebody else out. If we can go to the next slide. But really what I actually submitted, so that was an exciting component of an overall strategy. But what we also found in doing more servicing for sustainable infrastructure is that the locations and the amount is low. So waiting and the needs are more imminent. So in typical like roadway maintenance, what we do is we take a year and we look across, how many roadway issues we have, and then we bundle up all those issues, we put them into a contract of a sizable value, put it out to tender, get a contractor, and you hope that at that point for sidewalk maintenance or road maintenance, that from the time of report to the actual solve could be about 2 years. But we all know that, these, issues in the sidewalk and in bikeways really can't wait as long as a pothole where you're in a larger vehicle where there's more protection. And so we actually created a new procurement approach with our procurement team where we have what we call a roster. So we pre-qualify contractors, and then we can do what we call second stage assignments. So we basically qualify you to say, okay, you're good at these things. You've shown us through your past examples that you can take on this work. And then we issue these smaller assignments that fall below certain financial thresholds. They send us a bid by email, and then we as staff can approve that bid and move forward. So we have closed the gap between the timeline of 2 years to something that could be more like 3 months, 2 months. And that makes a huge difference. It also gives us the ability to actually decide on what kind of approach for maintenance, because a lot of maintenance is viewed as, okay, repair it as it is coming to you. But we've actually also within this system created the ability to say, okay, look, we're replacing this bollard and concrete curb in the bikeway over and over and over again, which means that there's some issue here with the design. How do we solve that without reducing the design intent of keeping people safe and protected? So, for example, we've done a lot of repairs where we're having repeated issues where we actually go from the precast material to the poured in place concrete material. And so these are some of the examples where we were having some repeated issues, and we actually scaled it up to an actual civil construction. And that's the flexibility that this procurement allows us to take in our approach to maintenance. You can go to the next slide. So how did we do it? What are the kind of some of the more details? Is that we have this roster, which is up to 5 contractors. Right now we have a total of 5 on our roster. We do about 15 bundled projects a year. So a project is just an assignment, but it could have many, many locations within it. And we spend about $5 million on these work. We have 3 staff who oversee this. And to create a really positive environment of understanding between the life cycle of our streets and our projects is that we do often have our design staff stay involved. So that they can understand what are the challenges we're seeing on the street from the long-term operating perspective versus from, the initial concept and design. So we think it's been a really great way to close that gap and to create a speedier maintenance and upgrade system that is more responsive to active transportation than the systems that we are traditionally working in maintenance, where it's focused on roadways and motor vehicle space. And so that's my presentation.
Right. Thank you very much. So great to see that happening in the city that many of us here today live in. So thank you very much. And thank you, all of you. These ideas are just, I think they're making a real difference, and we were delighted to feature them in our report. So again, would love to know your thoughts in the chat, those of you who are tuning in, if you have questions or comments. We're going to have a bit of a sort of broader discussion about municipal innovation and what this looks like. And my first question, which I will throw out to any of you who's interested to answer here. I heard all of you say words like quick, flexible, proactive. not necessarily words we often associate with government. And so I would be curious if you could talk a little bit about how you look at these quick wins and pursue quick wins and small fixes in a governance framework that is so often kind of biased toward moving slowly and considering and that has sort of a slower process to it. How do you push through some of these ideas to have quick wins that are really going to make an impact?
Sure, I can start. But I think it's really about identifying the need. And I think there is a lot of focus in government on figuring out how to meet the needs. And so if you can identify what those are, and I think our systems have changed quite a lot in the past 10 years, and really after COVID, the different perspectives. And so I have found that there's quite a lot of reception as long as you're willing to carry forward with going through all the paperwork. And I think it's really important to understand what quick means within the context of your organization. And so it took us probably about 2 years to get the roster out into the market and to procure the contractors and to get it completely operationalized. For me in city government, that is quick. And then it has led to even swifter response. But it does require, like it required legal review. It required, so I think it's really about understanding the, context of your community, of your city government, who are the players. But I would say that I have found that in Toronto, there's a shared value of figuring out how to meet the needs as long as you have a strong pitch and a strong idea of what you're trying to achieve.
I love that, the idea of needs first from leadership and meeting needs. Yeah, that's great. Caitlin, I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, I would say one of the things that I think helped with the success of the water station is also like scaling. So it we didn't start by saying like we will implement a strategy that puts a water station in every community in the city, because that sort of adds it just extends the process or like the amount of rigor. So if you can say like, well, there's lots of words like pilot or prototype, which are like really catchy, but also if you can, but it's often easier, even like I'm seeing comments about like procurement and like spending thresholds and all the things like that, you're able to, because if you're not like spending $100,000, it's easy to like push through some of this. But then you also behind you have buy-in, because then people see the need and are like, oh, the response to this has been really quite like fabulous. And so then there's like, as a corporation, you have more support in like further expanding or growing the project.
I can share a little bit. I won't say it was quick, but it was quicker than I expected. And one of the big pieces was it was COVID. So supports for small businesses were being impacted so heavily that council saw. So we were able to take that 2019 report put through a business case that said, okay, we've done these two elements. Now we need the space. And it was it was initially a $1.3 million ask from the city with some revenue generated by the space and rental and membership, because of the costs going up. And if you recall, COVID and a Suez Canal issue, costs were higher to build the space. So it ended up being 1.6 million investment by the city. We've been able to keep up with our revenues. We've been fortunate on that front, but I will say there was some push coming even from council to say, how are we supporting? So it really helped us be agile and come through quicker than we would have.
Yeah, it sounds as though part of it is support from council and support from leadership, but also support from the public, right? And one of the things I was wondering about is, your public servants in general are in pretty highly visible roles with a lot of scrutiny potentially from the public sector. And I'm curious how you balance taking risks and doing things with these high levels of scrutiny.
Okay, I'll take it. We're pretty lucky. This is my first time working in a municipality. I've been here sort of 6 years. We've had a lot of shifts. We've had two mayors, we've had a few city managers change, we've had different leadership, but our council's been really supportive of what we do, and I feel reasonable. And I think you talked about that public sector piece. We hear from the people who walk in our doors and our social media channels, but we're hearing from council too, right? So I think when we have that kind of support from all the different layers, it makes it easier to figure out that balance. If we're hearing from the community that there's an issue, can we be a little bit risky in how we address it without going crazy? It also helps a lot when we can look at other municipalities that have done it before. So it's, Brampton's right beside, we touch the borders with Brampton. So Brampton's done it before, it might help, but pulling in from across Canada and internationally and examples of things we've done, it really helps to go and be able to say, this is how it worked for them. This is what we're hearing, what we heard from the community, makes it a lot easier to do something that might be out of the norm.
Yeah, and I'll just say that as city staff, we always look for policy alignment, just like Donna shared. And so thankfully, our council is prolific in policy and in motion passing. And so, when we have a Vision Zero policy that says we want active transportation users to be as safe as possible. And I think that's where you can use your staff and your own professional judgment of, again, linking to this, what is the need? Because then it doesn't really feel so innovative or wild or wacky, because what it's saying is, and what we'll always as staff look to pose to say, well, in 2019 and in 2021 and in 2023, you passed these following directives to staff. And here is an approach that we would like to take to meet your directives. And I think framing it in that really can kind of take a lot of that kind of like, ooh, this is new and scary and could be different, really out of the room. And I think Donna made a really good point about a lot of what we're doing is just shaping how other places have done things for our community's needs. And so, again, couching that in that this is not, maintaining our active transportation network in a speedy way is not a wild and crazy idea. It's just, figuring out how we can do that in a way that, again, meets the needs and the policies that have already been set forth by decision makers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds as though it would be helpful if members of the public wrote in and said, we love these ideas that you're implementing. We want to see more of this. We want to see more water stations and beautiful water fountains and fixed bike lanes. So that's our job for everyone on the chat and on the call today to do. Great. One of the things that struck me is that each of these interventions is, in some ways, relatively small. It's a combination of relatively small things. It's mentoring conversations, or you're fixing a crosswalk button, or it's a water station. But this is the kind of thing that collectively reflects how we feel about our cities and how they're functioning, right? How do you emphasize the value of these small wins when I think we're often so inclined to get caught up in this idea of like the big problems that are facing our cities and the budget deficits and all these things? How do you emphasize the value of these small things?
I think they're so important as a way to connect with communities, and they are so meaningful to people. And I think you're right when you work in a large system of government, or you live in a bigger city or even a smaller city, that we are awash in large capital project ideas or big initiatives, the budget, the this. And I find that those start to be lacking some level of like real on the ground community connection. And I think, Caitlin's example of, a water source in a park, it's so meaningful to the people there. And it's the same with our work in Toronto. It's that, scaling it down. And I think, again, couching that in showing how that really can change just a few people's lives can be so more personal than a street widening that is going to take or a new transit line that's going to take us 30 years. Very, very important. We should definitely do those things. But I think people in the public are looking for every level of support. They're looking both on that one-to-one feeling that government is responsive. And I would think from a counselor and political lens, it's really meaningful for people in the public service to be mindful of how to have these personal, you know, moments with the community that feel very responsive to that community. So I haven't found it so hard, but I wonder if Caitlin's found it hard to pitch that to her communities or to show meaning.
No, I think I would say I am probably like a newbie to municipal government in the sense that it's been about 5 years. And I would say that oftentimes the feedback, I would say, especially working in housing and homelessness, it's not very often that you get people being like, you're doing a great job. It's just like hard to be winning in housing and homelessness these days. Um, but I have to say, even if people don't necessarily like empathize or see like the value of providing a water station to like a vulnerable individual, we have gotten a lot of emails from people saying, I think this is so cool. Like people like the innovation and like it's a very simple design. There's like not a lot of bells and whistles to it. And um, I think people can connect with that. And it's not an expensive program. And I think people like to are like, oh, the city's like doing something meaningful and it's pretty basic, but they champion that. And so I would say most of the feedback we get from water stations is actually pretty positive. We've definitely had to be like responsive. There's been times where you think you're putting it and it gets installed like on someone's lawn by accident, and then you get some angry people. But even now, people, even from like a festival perspective in the city, we have like festival organizers or like people who run civic events, and they're like, well, how do we get them like close to where a large group of people are gonna congregate? So yeah.
I'd like to ask a question about leadership. So, kind of a two-sided question. What role do leaders play in encouraging innovation in government? And how do you, as leaders, encourage the people you hire and work with to be innovative?
I get to answer that one because that's my job.
Wonderful.
Our team is the entrepreneurship and innovation team within the city, and of course we're focused on that job building side. But I think it's so nice to be part of a city that is very much focused on that, and they saw those opportunities. It's why I came over I'd been at U of T for almost 20 years. So leaving a job like that, knowing there was an opportunity to do that. Does it happen across all the city? No, but it's part of our challenge. We talked about procurement. That's been our biggest challenge. But we can see change happening now, where we have companies that join us because they see us as an avenue to get into the city to sell, right? And I don't mind, join us. We will work with you. We'll build your company, and we want to create those doorways. But it's hard, and it means going to different departments. And it isn't always the department heads. Frequently, it's the users, right? So trying to figure out where that works. But our procurement team has changed, and it's been part of what's coming from the federal level, provincial level as well. Now our low value acquisitions and our medium value acquisitions, they can look at local, and they should be looking at local first. They're looking at doing that also at the large value acquisitions, but that's harder to manage for many reasons. But in June, they're actually doing a reverse procurement event where the city is going to be presenting at our right beside City Hall, basically, to talk about these are the projects that are coming, and they've adapted their the portfolio. So if you go to the procurement page now, it's actually a lot easier to work with. It will send you email reminders when things come up, any of the RFPs or RFQs. So there's things that are shifting, and you can see that happening across the city. So I'd say it's nice to see. And as a leader within my own team, I'm getting pushed in both ways, right? So we want to see that that's happening. We want to encourage it. But I'm a little unique in what's happening in terms of where we are in that piece. So I'd love to hear what's happening from Becky and Caitlin.
Yeah, I mean, I think leadership is essential in any sort of change process, right? And basically being a municipal public servant, you can either, take the approach of uh, being a processor where you just process information and pass it along. And that's a very needed part of our government, such as people who issue permits and, manage certain components of the public service that, stability is more important than change. But I think you have, the three of us here who are really manage a lot of different types of change projects of different scales and size. And if you want to manage change, that means working with humans, which means navigating a whole slew of various different end goals, different priorities, different feelings, different starting points, different attitudes. Um, and to navigate that requires leadership in every way, in small ways of how you work together, all the way through somebody setting direction. Because without that, you can't, I don't think you can impact actual change. I think all you can do is process information, which again, important part of the public service is to, make things that exist as a process run smoothly. But we again live in a human system where there's always an opportunity to do more and better and to deconstruct and relearn and unlearn how our systems have built that are not fair to everybody, that disadvantage others, that are made for able-bodied, cisgendered people. There's all of that, and I think that's what we're all fighting against, and that requires leadership.
Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think they're like sort of building on what Becky was saying. It's almost like in the attitude, because I think sometimes if you have worked in a place for a long time and you just sort of like accept everything's going to take a long time, change is slow, and and I think around like the housing and homelessness file, one thing that we have leveraged is like a sense of urgency. Like people are dying. What can we like do this faster? Can we like think outside the box? And I and just sort of like pushing that to say like why does it have to take a long time? And I think in COVID we learned that actually like municipalities can respond very quickly if you need to, right? And so sort of trying to leverage that I think you almost have to like work against this grain that everything has to take a long time and be really expensive or really elaborate.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that we're talking about procurement again. Also, I think that's one of the things that maybe came out of last year that we weren't expecting as a bright spot. But let's make procurement sexy again. It's just about time for us to wrap up. So I am going to ask each of you to give me 10 seconds. Anything you want to share that you haven't had a chance to. Right. We've covered it all, it sounds like. Thank you all for the wonderful work you are doing. It is so inspiring to hear about it. It's wonderful to have these opportunities where we can learn from each other. Thank you to those of you who weighed in on the chat. Really interesting comments and questions there as well. I think in Canada, We need to do more about learning from all the great work that we're doing in places we wouldn't necessarily expect and learning from each other. That's why we wrote this report. I hope you will read it. We loved writing it. Please look into it to find more about these initiatives and many, many others, about 86 others, in fact. Thank you all for joining us today. Austin, I think you're going to tell us about the next Knowledge Cafe we have.
You jinxed me on it, Catherine. I just dropped it in the chat, but I just wanted to
Right.
also thank all of our speakers today. Our next session of Knowledge Cafe will be 1 week from today. It will feature Dr. L.K. Bertram of the U of T's Department of History and will be about digital disinformation and its role on democracy building. And I've also put a link to our link tree in the chat if anybody wants to subscribe to our newsletter, our social media channels, and so forth. So once again, thank you to our speakers and to all of our attendees today.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.